Hi, Lucia here from the Which Money podcast. Join us each week as we bring you the best experts and top advice to help you make the most of your money. From property prices to budgeting, investment platforms to pensions, we'll be here to keep you informed. Not only that, but we've just launched Money Shorts. These are brand new fortnightly episodes that will give you a taster of the Which Money magazine that is delivered to members every other month. So to hear the main podcast and our brand new Money Shorts episodes, just search for Which Money wherever you get your podcasts.
Our homes are becoming smarter. Whether you're buying something you need, like a fridge, or something that you want, like a TV, it's becoming almost impossible to buy products for your home without them being smart. But that smart kettle? It's likely got a use-by date. Are you willing to pay more for a toaster that could go off? And how many of your smart bulbs are likely to become dumb bricks by 2030? I'm Harry Kind.
And I'm Grace Farrell.
And this is Get Answers for living your best consumer life.
When life gives you questions, which get answers.
I feel like we should probably start by really defining what smart means when we're talking about like devices. Is just basically that it can connect to the internet.
Yeah.
That's all that it is. It is plugging any old device, whether that's like a lock or even a webcam, into the internet, which means that you can kind of control it remotely. It can send you information wherever you are in the world, and different devices can talk to each other. So your doorbell can turn on the lights and your toaster can wake you up with an alarm, that kind of thing. Amazing possibilities. I love a lot of my smart stuff, but ultimately, when you put the brains necessary for something to have that automation, to talk to each other, then you are going to run into problems.
Indeed. And to help us understand all this and ultimately buy the right things, we have two brilliant guests today. Andy Lachlan is a principal researcher and writer at Which Tech. Hello, Andy.
Hello.
And Fiona Deer worked for the Restart Project, a charity which aims to tackle the climate emergency by making electronics last longer. Hello, Fiona.
Hello.
Now, Andy, the reason we're talking about this is because Which has been campaigning for changes around smart product support for a pretty long time. It's something you've been involved with heavily, and it's obviously something that you're very passionate about. To quote what you wrote recently in Which magazine, you said, "This is the battle for the soul of the products we use every day," which I love. But what do you mean by that, and why is it so important?
Yes, ever the subtle one with my prose. Fundamentally, I do genuinely believe that, because ultimately the reason why we've made this such a big issue is because, obviously testing products is Which heartland. And increasingly over the last 10 years and even more into the future, we've seen sort of all our sort of traditional home devices, phones, tablets, TVs, washing machines, all sorts of things, becoming connected to the internet, which brings huge benefits in terms of new functionality, features, useful for people who've got accessibility issues, because it's sometimes often easier to use your voice or a tap of an app rather than trying to fiddle with some controls, which could be quite stiff to turn. But it also brings huge risks.
It's funny because the artistic read I took from that quote was like, you've got the device, which is like the skeleton and the body, and then you've got the soul, which is the kind of the smart functionality of it. And it's almost like this is a battle specifically about that smart soul that we now have in products these days, which we didn't used to.
Yeah, absolutely. And if we maybe extend the analogy, this soul, if we need to maintain our body and mind and soul, but this soul can be exclusively maintained by the manufacturer. You know, the way that software is built with a secure basis is you want to have control over who can mess around with it. You don't want to just be open to anyone necessarily, because then someone malicious could mess with the software and inject bugs. So you want manufacturers to control that software, but by extension, you want them to have a duty of care to maintain it for as long as possible.
Because ultimately, if I had a hose pipe on a washing machine that was leaking, I could take that up myself and repair it. I can't repair the code of the software of that washing machine, not just from a capability point of view, but in some cases, basically a legal point of view, right? There are restrictions on what you can do with it.
Yeah, absolutely. You've got to be absolutely careful. But also, there are so many dependencies. If we go into the kind of the bits and pieces, even to repair, you might need to get access to the semiconductors or the chip manufacturers or the people who wrote the software or any parts of it. You know, you might need access to the full supply chain just to fix some of these issues. I think most people at home wouldn't even understand what that means, let alone how to do it.
Well, on like kind of repairing things physically, Fiona, can you briefly just introduce what the Restart project is and what you guys do?
So we are all about keeping electricals and electronics in use for as long as possible. And a lot of the way that we do that is through repair. So we work with repair cafes across the UK, and repair cafes, they are kind of pop-up events run by volunteers. You can bring your broken thing and a volunteer will help you fix it. So that tends to be physical repairs, but obviously software comes into that a little bit. But as well as that side of things, we also campaign, and like which we can see the kind of big picture barriers to repair, and then we campaign for removal of those barriers, I guess, so that we can carry on repairing our stuff.
So, Andy, we've got a new product security law, the PSTI Act, which came into effect recently in April. Can you explain what that should have meant and whether companies are actually following it?
So PSTI stands for Product Security and Telecommunications Infrastructure Act. The provision that we're most interested today is that companies have to be transparent with people when they buy the product, how long they're going to support it. And this really is vital for two reasons. First of all, it gives the consumer some information about how long that toaster or kettle or whatever thing is going to be supported for. But also it forces a manufacturer to put a policy in the public domain. But while you should be able to see these best before dates, unfortunately, our research kind of showed that the take-up is quite patchy. And around about 29 out of 128 brands, that's around 23% at the time, had no response at all. So you're thinking like 1 in 5, just over, nearly a quarter.
Sorry, so when you say they had no response, so this is you reaching out to companies saying, how long are you supporting your smart products? And they just didn't respond.
Didn't respond, but then we also checked their websites. They had no policy. So we exhaustively checked as much as we could. And bear in mind that these policies are supposed to be accessible, transparent, and available to the public. I mean, if a consumer organisation with considerable resources can't find it, it doesn't really exist.
How long should products be supported for?
As long as possible, as far as I'm concerned. Ultimately, if you take, for example, a dishwasher, our sort of life cycle analysis suggests it probably is around 10 to 12 years, maybe a bit longer. Could be longer for a fridge. Smart TV, probably around 6 to 7. When you're starting to see policies of around a year on a big box appliance, as I say, from research, around 23 brands, 18% had a policy which was vague. So this was a policy where it would really be quite hard to understand what you're getting. One company said, we'll give you 2 years. Okay, was it 2 years in 1800s? Is it 2 years from the year 3000? It's 2 years doesn't mean anything. It's no use to somebody. People will use terms like from launch, and you won't know when the thing came out. So it shouldn't take a degree in engineering or whatever to work these policies out.
How are they getting away with that?
I think first and foremost, the regulations are vague. And
I think it's probably fair to say that public awareness of this is almost zero. So there's nobody holding them to account other than the likes of Which. Well done.
Yeah, that's absolutely right.
Yeah, I mean, if we were to have really obvious kind of best before dates on products and actually show how short the lifespans were because of software, people would be outraged and they'd be like, I'm not buying that. But it's not. And that's why manufacturers don't want to show it. But so in the absence of that, people aren't aware. Like often people buy smart products just because that's what's there. It's kind of a default thing now, right? It's not even necessarily, it's because I want to, talk to my fridge. And so they're ending up with this. They don't necessarily understand how the software works. Generally, if you talk about software, people switch off anyway, no pun intended. People just don't really want to go there. And to be fair, they shouldn't have to. Like if you buy a product from a reputable brand, you should expect it to have all of the features that it needs to last for the expected lifetime. You shouldn't expect it to have all of the physical features, but actually the software that's going to keep it safe is actually going to switch off halfway through. I mean, that's ridiculous. Yeah. And people just don't realise what they're getting. And they expect more, I think, from regulators and brands and things like that. And that's why we need to hold them to account.
And let's be really clear here on what the issue actually is. It could mean that, say, you're buying a smart dishwasher for £500 that's supported for 2 years from launch. That's when it first came to market. That's not when you bought the dishwasher. So if you buy it 18 months after launch, you may have 6 months of support on a £500 dishwasher. I mean, is that what we're saying?
Yeah, absolutely. And in fact, when we first looked at this stuff, we found a lot of things which actually come out of update support. They were no longer supported. And actually, the company was quite vague about it. So you don't really know what you're getting. I mean, I know for a fact that there are smart doorbells from certain brands that have update support is ending in December this year. And they're on the market right now and are probably in the market next year, in reality. Now, obviously, the manufacturers say, oh, yeah, we're still supporting it. But once the guaranteed period ends, then you are in a kind of wilderness, really, because that manufacturer can then say, oh, we've stopped doing that. We're going to drop it. And that could lead to that product maintaining and continuing in market and being okay. But it could mean that it completely stops working. And there are products that are coming up which will have situations where completely stop functionality, not only security, but functionality will go.
Have you got examples of that?
Yeah, absolutely. Hive will drop all of its cameras and alarms next year as it shifts to home heating, and those products will stop working at that stage.
So you bought a camera and it will just stop working?
Yeah.
You can't use these products without the smart functionality.
Because they'll switch the server off, because these things are some of these products are so dependent on the internet connection and that being facilitated. Once that's taken away, they are redundant. Someone the other day said to me, oh, I was just coming for the bus and I think, oh, it would be nice if I could just heat my oven up. But apart from that, I've never thought having a smart oven. And I said, well, I guarantee you, once you start doing that, you'll be like, oh, you'll just keep using it because it's useful functionality eventually. And then suddenly we realize we're stuck, we're connected, we are dependent. And once that goes, we get angry.
I mean, I've been there, and the number of times I will walk into a room and say, okay, Google, turn on the lights, and I realise it's not in my house. I mean, we've got that kind of quick consumer shift. Do you think part of that, Fiona, maybe is a consumer shift towards a bit of a throwaway culture, a bit of a, I will change my phone every other year and then I might as well change my washing machine every other year and all of that? Do you think there's that kind of culture shift?
Yeah, I mean, the throwaway economy that we're in, the fact that products aren't supported for long enough, it's all just a slow creep. And if we were to kind of like introduce this system that we are now to a society that didn't have this, right? And you were going to say, okay, how long would you expect your doorbell to last? People would say basically as long as my house, right? Decades. Yeah. But then you're going to say, no, but now we're selling ones that you can only expect to last 3 years. And that's top of the range. They'd just be like, you're crazy. Why would I do that? All of these things that we've suddenly got used to throwing away and don't even think of trying to repair or keep it in use. And it's a slow creep. It's the messages that we're constantly getting about, oh, there's this new feature that you can't possibly live without. And actually, like the evolution of products now is so minuscule each time, but we're just used to it.
Call me old-fashioned, but I think it's ridiculous that everything is smart these days. I just don't think it's necessary. I just think it's crazy, and it makes me just worried to hear that you think we're heading towards a time when everything will be smart and that is just what we will expect.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, when I first joined Which, I was in charge of the TVs project, so that's 2013. At that time, smart TVs, they were on the market, but they were a bit of an odyssey. You had like loads of random apps on them, like stocks. Oh, I'll look on Google Maps on my TV. Why would I do that? And now, good luck finding a non-smart TV on the market that's worth buying. The whole market's penetrated fully. So as soon as they found the killer app, then you're off, basically. And I'm sure traditional doorbell sales are dwindling. We know we've seen it in other markets. Baby monitors, your sat navs, no one gets them nowadays because everyone uses Google Waze or whatever it's called, I think. So as soon as the killer feature is there and consumers love it, that's it, game over.
Well, if we're talking about the kind of dark incentives of manufacturers, do either of you subscribe basically to the idea that these are products that are purposely being made to make us replace them? That there is this kind of planned obsolescence that happens in the security and the software, which people have always accused of happening in the hardware as well.
Yeah, I mean, this is a big bugbear of ours in general with repair. Business models are built around things being replaced more often. So it's not in the manufacturer's interest to provide spare parts, for example. That's why you need right to repair legislation. And these are all things kind of, whether it's a kind of evil people in a room thinking, how can we make people's products last less time? Or if it's just, again, it's kind of, it drops off the radar. You prioritise other things. You prioritise things looking sleek and a new model and all of that stuff. And the longevity of it just slowly kind of dwindles and we get used to it. The reason we're in this situation is that it's in society's interest and it should be the government's priority to have a system where we get the best products that are safe for as long as possible, that don't create loads of waste and things like that. But it's not us or government actually that's really setting the pace here. It's manufacturers and innovation and all of that exciting new stuff that's coming out and just kind of flooding us. And policy can't keep up. Consumers can't even keep up because we don't even know what's happening. And it's just, and this is how we've ended up where we are.
Well, we'll be looking more at what that kind of waste means for us, how we can increase the lifespan of a product, and also what some of the other risks are of having unsupported smart devices in our homes after this.
If you're enjoying this Which podcast, then you might also be interested in listening to other podcasts that we have to offer, like Which Shorts. Which Short is our weekly podcast that brings you a flavour of what the Which magazine has to offer, as well as our dedicated travel, gardening and tech magazines too. Each week we handpick a review, investigation or feature that was printed in one of our magazines and written by one of our award-winning writers. We then bring it to life on the podcast. So to get a taster of what Which members get in our suite of magazines, be sure to listen to Which Shorts wherever you get your podcasts.
Welcome back to Get Answers. Don't forget, we always want to hear from you. You can email us your comments and questions at podcasts@which.co.uk or get in touch on social media. We're at Which UK.
Now, let's talk about the security risks of smart products going out of date in our homes. This isn't about a product being bricked and not being useful anymore. It's just not supported. What are those risks?
Yeah, absolutely. So we should be careful not to scaremonger too much because we don't want people panicking. We don't want people not buying smart products just because they're worried or scared. But that said, there is a risk out there, you know, and while frauds and scams increasingly go online, cybercriminals are going to increasingly start seeing the smart home as a target. So back in 2021, we decided to sort of have a look at this and just sort of see the scale that was out there. So what we did was we bought a load of smart kit, and we're talking probably like 20, 30 items, and set them up in a simulated lab. And then what we did was we exposed it to sort of the worst corners of the internet, effectively. And it was pretty apocalyptic, really, to be perfectly honest. Within a week, we saw about 12,000 attempts to either probe the devices or directly hack them. So this might be people trying password combinations. So one of the measures of PSTI is banning kind of default passwords. Like, you know, you see a cam with admin all written on it, or 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. People try these passwords and just sort of see what works. You know, it's a bit like kind of opportunist theft in many ways.
What are they trying to get from doing that?
Breach the devices, really. And what they're probably trying to do in most cases is add them to what's called a botnet. So this is like big armies of sort of slave devices.
Oh,
yeah, I know. I know. It's sort of terrifying people. But basically what these are used is for online surveillance, online activity, like you can crash websites.
So you have a strong password for your smart device. What if it then stops being updated? I mean, does having a strong password still help?
It can to a certain extent, but you've got to think, an update support and like the commitment of the manufacturer means that they're keeping an eye on security. You know, it's a bit like kind of if you've got a kind of a shop or something that's nicely maintained, all the doors and locks and everything goes. The manufacturer moves out, doesn't bother so much. Things start getting a bit repaired. Maybe one of the windows gets put in. No one really does anything about it. You've got to think about it. That's a bit like them giving up on your product. It's like, well, it might still be okay. The doors might still be locked, but ultimately no one's checking anymore. No one's looking in there, and kind of you're on your own, you know. So I think people need to realize that once it falls out of that update support window, almost kind of that a layer of your protection goes. So we need manufacturers to be on it, ready, checking this stuff, responding really fast, and then putting out the patches that fix these things, because otherwise consumers are put at risk.
And to kind of drill this home, it's not just even that you have a smart fish tank and it gets hacked and then it kills your fish. That vulnerability in the smart fish tank can like expose the rest of your network. So you'll get onto your Wi-Fi system and then from that maybe even be able to access data that's coming from your computer, maybe banking information.
Potentially, yeah. I mean, and also you just got to think how useful some information can be. It can seem quite benign, but if someone knows, say, for example, you've got a tumble dryer, knows you use it at certain times of the day, knows that your account information on there, they can then send you a phishing email saying, hey, you need to renew your warranty, otherwise, you know, send me £200. Unfortunately, these things do work because we have a sense of trust.
So Fiona, given what we've just heard, how does that make you feel? Talk to us about tech waste.
Well, annoyed. But I think, so e-waste or electrical waste is the fastest growing waste stream in the world. And just to put it into perspective, the amount of electrical waste that we produce each year globally weighs more than the Great Wall of China. And that's each year. So the waste is a problem. And then you need to think about what's in that waste and what's in the devices. So our electricals have a lot of resources in them. A lot of them are critical raw materials that are rare and that we really need for things like electric vehicles, wind turbines, kind of moving to our new green economy.
And these are materials that occur in the earth, right? And there's a finite amount of them.
There is a finite amount of it. And there's all sorts of kind of more extreme mining that's been proposed that's really destructive to get more of this. And we have it in our products and we're throwing away. So that's about the materials. But then the other thing is just carbon emissions. So if you look at products like laptops and phones, smartphones, and you look at the carbon emissions that are produced the entire life cycle of the device, so that means basically from when it's dug up, the materials are dug up to when it is thrown away, 80% of the carbon emissions are produced before it even gets into your hand. So all through production and mining. So then throw it away after a couple of years is just ridiculous. If we're trying to get to net zero, we should be kind of designing these things to last as long as possible and for that to be useful. So it's infuriating from a kind of an environmental point of view, but it's also just frustrating for people. It's frustrating that people are kind of paying money for things that aren't designed to last. I feel like everybody has had that frustration when something breaks and you know that it's only a tiny little bit of it and you know that someone could repair it. If only you could find the right person and or if you knew how. But you've got to throw away this big thing that has a tiny little fault and it feels wrong. And we've all felt that, whether you're an environmentalist or not, like we know that from surveys. So we don't want to be in this position as consumers, but we are. And it's because of what we talked earlier on that we've kind of ended up in this position.
And we have these items that aren't lasting as long, but they're also just not as easy to repair, are they, even when they do break down?
Yeah. And so what we do is we work with this network of repair cafes, and that network has sprung up by people who feel that frustration and they want to keep things in use for longer and they want to use their skills. So there are 650 of them around the UK, and all of the networks that we talk to are just seeing so many people getting in touch and wanting to set these up because they just want to deal with this problem. And there are people with skills and they want to use them. And the good thing about repair cafes is that you get to be part of the fix. You don't just drop it off. You get to kind of see how your product works. So there's more chance you'll be able to fix it in the future.
And there has been legislation to try and protect that ability to repair things. Is that right? Is that across Europe?
Yeah, so there's we call it right to repair legislation, and it's kind of popping up everywhere. So there is legislation in Europe, and actually we have some in the UK that it's just for white goods like fridges and also TVs. In Europe, that legislation has evolved and it now covers smartphones and tablets, and that legislation includes a requirement for software support for at least 5 years. I don't think that's long enough, and actually the software support requirement is 5 years and the requirement to provide spare parts is 7 years, which doesn't make sense. But we are where we are. There was pushback from companies. And then again, we're seeing lots of right to repair laws pop up in individual states in the US. So there was an ambitious one in California, which means that products have to have 7 years of support. And of course, what's important about this is that if a company is going to have to provide support for California, then it's going to be available to all of us. So the more there are these laws and the more ambitious they get, the better for all of us.
I guess still the issue remains with the smart product updates and support. Obviously, we've got this new bill that's passed, but not all companies are kind of playing by the rules yet. So, Andy, do you have any advice? You know, if you are in the market for a new device, what should you be looking for? Are there particular brands that are doing it better than others?
So if you're looking for appliances, the big German brands Bosch and Miele are generally doing it really, really well. They offer 10 years, but that's also from discontinuation. So a lot of policies are often from launch. So not only do you have to know when the product was out, but it might have actually expired by the time you buy your device. But this will be actually from the last product that's on sale. So when that thing rolls out and it's no longer on sale, they'll give you 10 years from there, which actually could be a long time, you know, for your washing machine or whatever. Tado, which is a smart thermostat brand, they also do the same kind of level of guarantee. So if you're in the kind of smart thermostat, smart radiator valve kind of market, then that's really good. Ring, obviously there are some other things around Ring, but you know they do actually offer a decent level from discontinuation, so they'll support for a long range. And they have been, to be fair, transparent for a while with their policies. So I think that needs some merit. And there's a few other smart brands that are quite decent. Apple generally offers 5 years, but we do know that they generally will go to 6. So 6 years on an iPhone is not bad. It's okay. Maybe not quite market leading, but it's pretty decent because it's such a popular product. And there are a few others who do a decent maybe 5 years, 6 years. So it's certainly not the case that there are bad opportunities out there and people can actually get a really decent deal if they shop around. It's just a shame that not everybody takes it on themselves to offer at least your consumer rights, which I think is 6 years, in theory. If you're buying marketplace stuff of this kind of usually cheap, I mean, you can get like smart doorbells for like 15 quid, like maybe a camera for 25, it's pretty cheap. Be careful and be wary because you probably will have no idea when that thing's going to be dropped. It might have other issues as well. Also, it's worth people looking around their house, doing a little bit of audit of what they've got smart-wise in the home already and just starting to think, has this stuff already been dropped?
I was just going to ask, how do you do that? How would you do this audit in your home?
Well, it's tricky because the rules only apply for products that were sold, on sale, after the 29th. So if it's kind of an older product that went off sale before the 29th, it's not actually covered by this legislation. But a lot of manufacturers are giving historical information. You could contact them directly and ask them if it's been supported. We've been tracking this stuff for years, so we do have tools online for, say, routers or smartphones or tablets.
And you just put in the brand and model and it will tell you whether it's still supported?
Yeah, that's right. If it isn't supported, then you probably need to think. In some cases, you may need to balance the risk.
Which is a really difficult thing to do because I've got a no-brand, dodgy-as smart light switch
that's interesting.
in my flat, and it's just going to sit there. And I would probably even struggle to remember the manufacturer. I'd struggle to remember it's even there. It's so integrated. Or a light bulb, a smart light bulb, you wouldn't even see that in your house. It just becomes part of the network. You don't even interact with the software because it's all going through Home Assistant or Google Home or whatever. So it really is quite pernicious, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, you might have bought a house with a smart... My downstairs neighbour bought a house with a smart oven in it. And she went, there's a smart oven here and a smart thermostat. And, a lot of people probably are buying smart products without even knowing it.
Yeah.
Now, washing machines, dishwashers, around 40% of the market that we test is smart. So it's quite high, you think, when you think about it. So people probably are buying a smart one without realising it, taking it home, maybe connecting it, maybe not, but not really thinking about it, But we want... in the first instance, is to work fully. So everybody to be transparent, everybody to actually do what they're legally required to do. And we're calling on that. We also want there to be sort of a minimum threshold here.
Yeah.
There really should be. And there is stuff going on at EU. Again, we asked for it to be included in the UK legislation and we're rebuffed. But we will be coming back for that again because the manufacturers aren't going to do it voluntarily. Let's be honest.
Fiona, to end on a positive note, is anyone doing good stuff here? And I'm like, speaking from my own personal experience, I bought a second-hand set of drawers that was IKEA set of drawers. I went on IKEA. They will send out for free any spare parts. And that, I think, is a fantastic way of, extending the life. Are there any other good players out there?
There are good examples, like a lot of people have heard of Fairphone, which it's kind of a modular smartphone, which means that you can just, the way you used to be able to take a battery out of your old phone, it's that easy. You can just unplug bits that aren't working and very easily replace them.
Right, so the camera breaks, the lens smashes, you can just slot that out and put in a new one.
Yeah, and there's a similar version of that, which is called a framework laptop, and again, it's all modular. So it's very much designed so that people can repair and so that they don't need to kind of replace very often. And even kind of more traditional products, there are good examples like dual-lit toasters are always mentioned that they're easy to repair. Of course, they're really expensive. But, there are examples. It's possible. And I don't know if I'd necessarily hold this up as a as a kind of a great example of a manufacturer being brilliant. But there was a campaign in the States by an organisation called US Public Interest Research Group, and they realised that Chromebooks were about to kind of go offline. Yeah. And of course, Chromebooks are what schools use. And there were millions of Chromebooks in schools and libraries across the US that were just going to have to throw them out. Yeah. They ran a really effective campaign, and then Google agreed to extend the software support for 10 years. Wow. Which is massive, significantly longer. And they estimated that it saved about $1.8 billion in kind of schools having to replace these devices. And it just shows that kind of if manufacturers are pushed, if they have to, they can do it. we just need to make that happen, and partly through legislation, although that's slow, but also through consumer pressure. So I think what Andrew was saying about kind of asking manufacturers how long is this supported, the more often they get that question, the more they're going to realise consumers are noticing.
On that optimistic note, thank you both so much for joining us and enlightening us and helping us repair our lives.
Keep on fighting the good fight.
Where can people find more about the Restart Project and yourself, Fiona?
So our website is therestartproject.org. You can find out about our repair and reuse declaration through our website, and also we've got this brilliant map of repair cafes across the UK, and you can find that via our website.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
To stay up to date with our fight against insecure smart products, you can subscribe to our free monthly tech newsletter. You can find a link to that in the show notes. Give us a follow on social media as well. We're at Which UK.
Today's Get Answers was presented by me, Harry Kind, alongside Grace Farrell, produced by James Rowe and Rob Lilly-Jones, and edited by Eric Breer. And thanks again to our wonderful guests, Fiona Deer and Andy Loughlin. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Hi, Lucia here from the Which Money podcast, alongside our weekly episodes where we give you all the best advice on how to make the most of your money. We've launched Money Shorts. Each fortnight we bring you a taster of the Which Money magazine with hand-selected reviews, investigations and features by our award-winning writers brought to life on the podcast. That means you can get a taste of what the Which Money magazine has to offer without paying a penny. So join us every Monday for a brand new episode of Money Shorts, as well as every Friday for your regular episode of the Which Money podcast. Just search for Which Money wherever you get your podcasts.